Thanks, Linda. I appreciate it, and thank you all for coming out. Moving around the district, this is one of our district work breaks, so I'm going to be moving around the district just talking to folks about what's going on and getting your ideas and thoughts and concerns. I was going to talk specifically about some of the things we're doing with the Small Business Committee, but I actually think what I'm going to talk about is some of the things that are happening in Washington right now, kind of what the climate is and what's going on with the various issues out there, which obviously the biggest thing facing us right now is the budget and how we deal with that and trying to cut spending, which Washington has a huge spending problem right now. It's not a revenue problem, it's a spending problem, and that's kind of one of the biggest at least differences between the different groups in Washington right now is whether it is a revenue or a spending issue. And I'll kind of walk through some of the bills that we have recently had and some of the stuff we've got coming up and how we're going to deal with it. Obviously, when we had the fiscal cliff issue, which is dealing with the tax increase that was coming on the 1st, we were able to push through that. We essentially got at least 95% of everything that we wanted, at least from the House Republican side, and that was the biggest part of it, was making permanent all of the marginal rate structures, making permanent the inheritance tax and the exemptions that are out there now, and pretty much everything we did. We did not get, though, a spending proposal. We wanted to cut back on spending, but we were not able to get that in there. So we moved forward. We're going through that process right now with the budget. And what we had just this week, when it came to the issues that we were dealing with, one of the things, obviously, that we've been pushing is trying to force the Senate to come up with a budget. They haven't passed a budget in 4 years. Now that creates a problem when you're trying to obviously deal with the spending parameters and the appropriations bills that come out. If you don't have a budget, or you don't have those bookends that are hamstringing spending, then it's going to run wild, just like it has. The House passes a budget. We had the Ryan budget last year. We're going to have another budget that's coming up here very quickly, very shortly, that the House will pass. But the Senate still has shown no indication whatsoever. So what we did with the debt ceiling increase, which we did pass a short-term extension, it's a little bit different than we've done in the past, and I'll explain that a little bit farther. But we did increase the debt, or the debt borrowing capacity. But one of the provisos in there is we said that both chambers have to pass a budget, or members of Congress do not get paid. The House will get their budget passed. In fact, we will have our budget probably within the next 3 weeks. This has to be done before May 1st. So what we're trying to do with that is force the Senate, if they want the debt limit increase, then we're going to force the Senate to pass a budget. And if they don't pass it, then they're not going to get a paycheck until they do pass it. So that's the reason for the debt, or what we did in the debt limit increase. Now, we did do it a little bit differently this time than we've done in the past. In the past, with the debt limit increases, what we have always done is given the Treasury Department a certain amount of money. They always come up with the dollar figure that they need, and they always over-exaggerate that. And then what they do is they get those dollars and they stockpile that, and they still continue to spend. We did it differently this time. Basically, we gave them the authority to borrow more money, but only for those bills that come due during this time period. And this goes through May 1st. So whatever expenditures that we have coming up, like Social Security, military pay, Medicare, whatever the case may be, they're allowed to borrow just those amount of dollars. They can't borrow anymore. Secretary Geithner was very frustrated by that, but we're trying to figure out some way to at least close the administration in when it comes to borrowing. So now what's going to happen next is we're going to start through these budget negotiations, and we have to have some real spending reforms, and that's what we're trying to do, is force the Senate to come to the table and the administration. Now, if they don't come up with a budget that has real cuts in it, then sequestration kicks in. And if you remember, sequestration was the name given to the cuts across the board when we created that super committee. Remember the super committee that was supposed to come up with some meaningful cuts, and if they didn't do it, that sequestration was going to kick in. That happens in 2 weeks. Sequestration was going to kick in, and that's across the board, cut in everything. Everything takes it across the board. Well, the administration doesn't want that, because they don't want to see some of the entitlements get cut back. Things like food stamps, things like Medicaid. They don't want to see them cut back, but the fact of the matter is, it's coming. So the president either comes to us and talks to us about real spending reforms, or we're going to allow sequestration to go ahead and kick in. They also have to, obviously we've got that budget deal that's out there forcing the Senate to come up with some real spending reform. So there's a lot of things that are in play and a lot of things that are in motion that's going to happen in the next 2, 3, 4 months that hopefully is going to allow us to get the country back on track. We can't continue with $1.5 trillion plus deficits every year as this president has proposed and done now for 4 years. We can't continue down that road. It absolutely cannot go any farther. We can't sustain it. We can't pay for it. We just simply can't do that. And remember, a deficit is just 1 year spending above what the government's going to take in. And then the cumulative effect of that is the debt, which continues to rise and rise and rise as each deficit comes through. So that's kind of where we are at the moment. And we're waiting to see what happens with the Senate on the debt limit increase and this proposal that they don't get paid unless they do pass a budget. They will either send that back changed or they will accept it the way it is. We've kind of got their back against the wall on this, and it'll be interesting to see just how they move forward. I do want to briefly mention the Farm Bill, which is out there. We've got a very interesting dynamic when it comes to the Farm Bill right now, and we're struggling with how we are able to move it forward. Traditionally, we've always had a pretty interesting coalition. The Farm Bill is made up of nutrition programs and obviously those agriculture programs that are out there. 80% of the Farm Bill is all nutrition. It's food stamps, which is the biggest part of it, WIC, school lunch program, things like that. 20% of it is the ag portion, which is rural development, which isn't actually ag, but it's rural development we use for, those are dollars that are used for communities with water systems, they're dollars that are used for hospitals, whatever. It's rural development block grants is what it is. Then the conservation program and the actual traditional farm program, those things make up the other 20%. Well, one of the things that we were looking at in trying to come up with cuts, and as a result of sequestration, if it goes ahead and goes in, the Ag Department was going to get cut $30 billion. So what we decided to do is we were going to take half of that, $15 billion, out of nutrition and half of it out of agriculture, which is disproportionately higher in ag since it's only 20% than it is in nutrition, but we thought it was a pretty good compromise. Well, in the past, again, we've always had this coalition of rural lawmakers and inner city lawmakers that are able to come together to get the Farm Bill passed. Well, this year, as a result of the cuts, the inner city folks don't like it. And so what they are trying to do is strip ag completely out of the farm program altogether. If the bill comes to the floor and there's an amendment offered to do just that, it'll probably pass. We'll probably lose all of ag out of the farm bill. That's one of the reasons why we haven't had the Farm Bill up yet in Washington, because we're afraid of losing everything. We've got an extension through the rest of the fiscal year, which is through September 30th. But right now, we're struggling with trying to come up with a compromise with some of the urban lawmakers to try to get this worked out. But that is one of the reasons why the Farm Bill has not come up yet, which is obviously very important to North Missouri and to the 6th District overall. But with that, I'd much rather take questions. I could stand up here and talk all day long. I got a little bit of a head cold, but I'd love to hear your questions, your ideas, thoughts, concerns. Yes, ma'am.
Well, how do you feel about John Boehner?
What's the question?
The question was, how do I feel about John Boehner remaining as the Speaker? I like John. I think he does a good job. He's kind of tasked with an impossible position because we are the House of Representatives. It's 2 against 1. We've got the Senate and the administration against us, or us against the Senate and the administration, and trying to hold back some of these things and trying to hold back some of the things he's doing, for instance, through executive order, which right now he's going after Second Amendment rights, obviously through the presidential order. And it's kind of an impossible job. But John does a pretty good job at the compromise and trying to work through it. He's also got a very diverse conference, obviously, just in the Republicans themselves. There's a pretty wide degree of differences even between Republicans, but I was pretty happy with it. And the question was, shake him up, is he being more aggressive? He's going to try to be, but again, we're only 1/3 of the process in Washington, so just how aggressive he can be and be able to get anything done has yet to be determined. But it's an impossible situation, to be honest with you. It's a tough job. It is. Yes, sir.
1/5 of the process, but you hold the purse strings. So that's 100% of the process when it comes down to the bottom line. And what is the consensus on the Second Amendment with this power grab by the left? It's clear that they're trying to strip us of our rights. What's the consensus amongst the conservative representatives?
Well, and I don't know if there is a consensus, but I'll tell you what I think is going to happen. And I'll tell you, obviously the way things are working right now. Obviously, you've got the administration that's trying to do as much as they can through executive order. They stopped just short of an all-out ban on certain firearms through executive order. But now you've got Feinstein, who came out with her bill in the Senate. And she's obviously banned, she names them. It's different than the assault weapons ban she put together, or they put together a few years ago, because they actually named a certain amount of those weapons out there, and then they go through the process. I don't think the bill is going in. I know it's not going anywhere in the House. Now, whether or not Senator Reid brings it up in the Senate has yet to be determined. Reid comes from Nevada. Nevada thinks a whole lot like Missouri does when it comes to the Second Amendment, so he's stuck between a rock and a hard place. So what he has indicated is he may let Feinstein's bill come up, but he's going to allow it to be completely open for amendment, which means it's going to be amended and amended and amended to the point where it's either watered down or it's unpassable, which is a possible tactic too. But regardless of what happens, I don't think anything will come over or will get through the House. If it comes to the House, it won't go out. Now the changes that are being looked at, and they really don't affect Second Amendment. One is to do a better job when it comes to our mental health screening and trying to help those people that need help. And obviously that's what we got into with the situation and the problems obviously back east and some of the other shootings that we've had. And the second thing is get the federal government more involved when it comes to prosecutions or enforcing the laws that we already have. The district attorney in Chicago has pointed out, for instance, that one of the things that people who commit crimes with guns, one of the things that they are afraid of is being tried under federal court rather than in a state court, because it can be much harsher. But that means the federal government's going to have to do their job and prosecute those crimes that are already, or those laws that are already on the books. So those are two things that I see coming out of this and happening. What happens with the gun show issue on background checks, I don't know yet. If it's part of Feinstein's bill, it won't go through the House. If it's a separate bill altogether, it possibly could. But I'll be honest with you too, I'm a little offended by Senator Feinstein when she tells me that I don't need this particular gun or this particular weapon or this particular magazine because I have no business with that. And she likes to use hunting. Have you noticed that? You don't need this for hunting, but the bottom line is it's none of her damn business what I want to use it for. If I'm a collector or if I'm coyote hunting, whatever the case may be, it's still none of her business. And for her to say that these particular firearms are bad, but yet a Browning semi-automatic rifle or a Remington semi-automatic rifle that's used for deer hunting, but it has a wooden stock on it rather than a polymer stock on it, is somehow those are good and these are bad, but it's the exact same caliber, the exact same mechanism. For her to say that I shouldn't be able to have these because they look bad rather than the other, I think that's, I'm offended by that, and I don't think it's going.
Well, nobody's afraid of deer, Sam. People are afraid of the government, okay? So, and this is what's going on. I was at a meeting last night that they couldn't fit them all in the hall. It's a local 912 meeting. And so many people are alarmed by this. You can't buy ammunition anywhere. That tells the story. They're not afraid of deer coming into their home. They're afraid of the jackbooted the Gestapo that they're training under Homeland Security. How about defunding these people so they can't get trained when they do finally come around to getting these? Just don't give them any money.
And it's a great point. But as far as anything, at least for the time being, nothing's going through. It's not going through the House.
That's good.
So you can count on that.
Count on you for that.
And the filibuster will be an interesting aspect in the Senate too. Yes, sir.
What kind of devices does the Republican House have at its disposal to counterbalance issues? And the second part of the question is, if you'll indulge me, do you think those instruments ebb and flow according to its popularity numbers?
And the question was, what kind of tools do the Republicans have in the House in terms of the president's initiatives and how that is affected by popularity with the president? And what we have, the tools we have, at least right now, are very limited. And it's a defensive strategy. It's a very poor way to run government, but right now it's what we have. So the president comes out with a presidential order, let's say giving the EPA more power than it has before, for instance, in regulating waterways, which is a serious problem in terms of if the EPA gets the opportunity to regulate any standing body of water. Right now it's just navigable bodies of water. The EPA gets the opportunity to regulate any standing body of water. That means any old slough you have or pond you have behind the house, creek that's running through your property. They will have jurisdiction over that and be able to regulate you as to how that is used. Well, if it's something like that is passed in presidential order, and this president has abused that option more than any other president in the past. All presidents use presidential order or executive order to an extent. This president has really used it. But what we can do is allow no dollars to either be used to enforce or to implement the particular regulation. That doesn't mean it goes away. And it makes it very tough if you're out here running a business or running a farm. When you've got a regulation in place, there's no money to enforce it, which the EPA, for instance, would have no dollars to enforce that. But it doesn't mean it's still not out there. So that's a tough decision. Do I go ahead and comply with this, knowing that maybe someday they might get the money, or do I just turn my back to them and not worry about it? And that's what I mean by it's a defensive strategy. It's not a very good one, but it's all we have at the moment. Because if the president passed a presidential order, and then we just put a bill together in the House to rescind it, it would never go anywhere in the Senate, and that's actually the case. Many of the presidential orders we have passed bills out of the House to just completely rescind them, but Harry Reid just shelves them, and they go absolutely nowhere. And what's more, even if they did pass it, the president would just veto it, is what he would do. Now the good news is any new president could come in and rescind those just as quickly as they were put into place. Now it's harder to get rid of something than it is to just stop it from passing in terms of legislation or even in terms of presidential order. But the fact of the matter is it can be done just as quickly as it's put in place. As far as the question on how much that changes based on his popularity, I don't think it really changes too much. At least it doesn't in the House. And the wilder he gets with some of these things, even the more resolve we see in the House to try to stop him and to do that through the appropriations process. So it's and it's always a give and take to a great extent, but that's all we have right now. Just stop funding being used when it comes to implementing or enforcing. And in some cases, you literally have laws on the books out there that have absolutely no way to be enforced whatsoever. And there are two types of laws. Remember that too. Regulatory authority, which is again the agencies or the president using the regulation to put a law into place. And there's statutory law. Statutory law are those things that are passed by both chambers and signed by the president. Regulatory law is much tougher to deal with, particularly given the agencies the way they are right now.
Sam, as chairman of the small business community in the House and also a member of the Transportation Committee, what legislation or issues do you see coming before your committee as small business, as well as the Transportation Committee? And I think we're still waiting on a transportation bill, are we not?
We are. We're still waiting on a highway bill, which we are, and actually I'll talk about that here in just a minute. I am going to talk just a minute about small business, and one of the things, or a couple of things we're doing right now in the Small Business Committee is we're expanding on the contracting changes that we've been working on. We're trying to make it so that more small businesses can participate in federal contracts. The federal government spends billions and billions of dollars every year on goods and services that they need. And they have got it written in such a way that it makes it tough for small businesses to be able to compete for those contracts. and much easier for big business to be able to compete for those contracts. We want to allow small business to be able to do more of that and make the process a little easier and a little bit quicker, so the small businesses can get in there and compete. Small businesses can't afford to hire somebody just specifically to go after government contracts. In most cases, small businesses are limited just simply by their size and being able to do that. So we want to make it easier to participate in those. That's one of the things that we're doing in the Small Business Committee right now. Transportation Committee with the highway bill, which we're working on right now, trying to move it forward. The problem we have is with the earmark ban that is out there. Highways are funded through a trust fund. It's the trust fund that's created, the Highway Trust Fund. Whenever you go buy gas, there's a certain amount of what you pay for gas goes into, it's obviously taxes, and it goes into the Highway Trust Fund. That pays for all of our roads and bridges. Well, in the past, when we've done highway bills, basically that money is divided up again amongst all of the members of Congress, both the House and the Senate, and we divvy it out that way. And we find projects in the bill that way. Well, with the earmark ban, the way it is now, we can't do any earmarks. That means we can't specifically write into the legislation that dollars go to Highway 63 or Highway 65 or Highway 36, whatever the case may be. All the lump dollars go straight to the administration, and the administration decides. There's still going to be projects, and that money's still going to go out there. It's just taken all of that power away from Congress to be able to determine how that money is spent, and it's all given to the administration. That's the downside of earmark reform that we have right now. My idea of earmark reform, what I've always wanted to do is just make it totally transparent. And we all know what earmarks we're talking about. It's things like the Christmas Tree Museum in North Carolina. That's an earmark that is a frivolous earmark, and it's a poor use of taxpayer dollars. And what I think is each earmark that does come up like that, let the individual stand up and defend it on the floor. I guarantee you, nobody's going to stand up and defend that earmark. And if it comes to a vote, it isn't going to pass. But when you've got infrastructure earmarks, particularly those things in the highway bill, they are going to pass because it's basically divided up amongst the members, and the members get to choose. The way I always did it in the past, the last two highway bills I've been a part of, what I have done is we get together with the local planning commissions, we get together with all the county commissions, we get together with the cities, and we decide what are the priorities, where should the money be spent, how should we divide it up, those dollars that go into the 6th district, for instance. And then we've always been able to be able to, and one of my biggest, or at least I'm front line on, is the BRO program, which is the money that our counties use to access, to be able to pay for off-system bridges. These are bridges that are not part of the federal highway system, but bridges that we are replacing out here in all of our counties. It's a program that we use heavily in the state of Missouri, but the administration doesn't want it. If all that money goes to the administration, there isn't going to be any dollars for the BRO program. So that's what's holding up the highway bill right now, is trying to rewrite the earmark ban so that we're allowed to be able to have input again on how those dollars are spent in our respective districts, rather than just giving it all to the administration. The administration, decide where it's going to go, which is probably going to be the East Coast and the West Coast, where the majority of the population is. Hopefully we're going to, with a new chairman, we've got a brand new chairman in the House, Bill Schuster. He's a very close friend of mine, and he's working right now to try to get that done, and obviously get a highway bill done, and be able to move that forward. Yes, sir. What's our chances of getting control of the Senate in 2 years?
And number two is, what's this nuclear option you're hearing about? Why is that possible to go
The nuclear option, I guess I don't
There,
understand.
he's talking about the nuclear option, or the legislature.
Filibuster. What's our chances of taking the Senate? I don't know. I thought we had a pretty good chance last election, but I was obviously wrong.
How we gonna stop these crazies out here that's pretty
And I don't know. I don't know. I may be one of the crazies. I don't know.
Well, we need some advice out here, someone go to work. We got 2 years to get it done.
But in the nuclear option, obviously, Harry Reid is trying to eliminate the filibuster. It's kind of funny because he's got to break the rules and change the rules. He hasn't quite figured out how to do that yet, to be able to get it done. But the filibuster is it's a tool of the minority, And the thing that you always remember is, you never know when you're going to be in a minority and want to use that, and it's protection of the minority interests that are out there. So he's going to try to change it. He's going to try to eliminate it. Basically, the filibuster allows, in the Senate, anybody can stand up and talk for as long as they want on any one particular issue. Now, to shut that down, to shut debate down, it's called cloture, you have to have 60 votes. So while a bill may only take a simple majority to pass, you've got to have a 60 vote margin to be able to stop debate on it. So in some cases, debate goes on and on and on, and then you kill an issue through the use of talking it to death, is essentially what the filibuster is. And Harry Reid is trying to change it so he eliminates the filibuster, which means he can just pass anything he wants right on through. And they could do that. Obviously, you'd have to get it through the House to be able to do that, and the House is obviously the check and balance for the Senate right now, and vice versa that way. But I don't know if Reid will get it done or not. He's been talking about this since he's been President Pro Tem of the Senate. It's going to be awful hard for him to do it. He needs to be real careful of that, though, because someday he'll be in the minority again, and then he will use it to his advantage. But it's hard to tell. I can't tell you if they're going to get it done or not, but I don't believe he will. So, yes, sir.
I don't have a lot of the details. I thought I read something today about a federal court of appeals decision which made ruled unconstitutional some of the president's appointments in labor relations. Is that going to have any good impact as far as stemming that tide of presidential directives and those kind of things outside of Congress?
It won't have any. It won't have any effect pretty much on in some of his presidential orders, but it could have some effect, obviously, on his appointments. One of the things that presidents do, and they've all taken advantage of it, is try to do recess appointments. Because recess appointments get a little bit different. They get different, or they're looked at differently than regular. Through the process, regular order appointments. And they do that so that they don't have debate on them, and they do that so that they can try to push it through. And I don't know what kind of effect it's going to have. I don't know if it's going to force them to have to do regular order for all of them, or what's going to happen. But I guarantee you it's going to end up going up the chain. The Supreme Court will probably obviously have the final decision on that. But I'd be speculating in a big way if I tried to, it'd just be an opinion is all it is. And I just don't know what's going to happen. Yes, sir.
First of all, a comment on earmarks. I think you're absolutely right. One of the things that not on earmarks is to understand much harder than how we're going through earmark projects or how we're going totally free. And a lot of good projects don't earmarks are never done. So yes, that needs to be changed. But the other question I have is where do you stand on including district offices? And if you put one here in Hannibal, and who's going to have it?
Yeah, and I want to add to that also in terms of the earmark. There's another bill out there which is the exact same way. It's called WRDA. It's the Water Resources Bill. That's the bill that has our projects in it for all our waterways. Locks and dams on the Mississippi is in that bill. All the stuff is in Missouri. It's the same deal. Now we have no control whatsoever on how that money gets spent. The administration does. And they obviously have a much different idea on how rivers like the Mississippi should be managed rather than we do out here when it's an issue of commerce and trying to modernize those locks and dams. As far as our offices, where we're going to put an office here in Hannibal, and we'll be getting that up as soon as we can. The reason we don't have it up at this point is because I didn't take over the new 6th district until I got sworn in on January 4th or whenever it was. And we can't even look at space or negotiate space until after I'm officially representing an area. So we couldn't even start the process until 2 weeks ago or 3 weeks ago, whenever it was.